Today's video is all about the babies. Who doesn't love welcoming someone new to the family, to your friend group, to the community? This is going to be some ideas that you can stitch up for baby showers, for new baby gifts, or for your own babies. I know this is a long video, so I have listed each of the projects and the timestamps in the description. So you can kind of take a look, decide which one you want to watch first. But I've just wanted to put everything together in one place so you don't have to jump all over YouTube or jump all over my channel to find things. So just check out those timestamps. And then be sure to leave me a comment. I would love to know which ones you're going to try first. And if there's something you were hoping to find that isn't here. And this is for personal use. If you want to dive into the sewing and selling things for babies, you got a couple hoops to go through. That is going to be another video. If I have completed it, please check the description below this video and you'll be able to see the link to that so that you can see and decide if you want to go through the record keeping and the compliance that you need to do in order to keep the babies and kids under 12 safe and keep yourself safe legally. Cloth diapers are one of my favorite ways to make burp cloths, and they're just so much cuter when you decorate them with some fabric. This is a great and quick project for baby showers, to sew and sell, or just for your own baby. So let me show you the two ways and then let me know in the comments which one you prefer. If you want to have everything nice and squared off and you want to have a nice rectangle, we're going to sew one piece of fabric on one side of the diaper. So that is option one. Option two, which is a little bit quicker, uses a little bit less fabric, is to just put a strip of fabric down the center where the diaper is a little bit thicker anyway. Now, let me show you how to do both of these options. So here's what you need. You can buy these Gerber fabric diapers in a 10-pack. They are approximately 20 inches by 14, but they're not perfectly squared off because they're meant to be a baby's diaper, so it's not super important. So I have the sides lined up and you can really see how wavy this is at the bottom. It's honestly not a huge deal when you're using it as a burp cloth. Nobody's going to be checking your lines. It is really personal preference. So this is the way I have shown how to do it before. It takes less fabric than doing this, but when I put one on top of the other, it really highlights just how crooked the bottom one is. So I'm going to take my fabric that's a little bit bigger than the diaper and put it face up, and then we're going to put the diaper on top of it. That really shows you just how crooked everything is, doesn't it? And then you're going to pick one edge to use as your straight edge. So I'm just going to use one of these sides because that looks pretty straight, and we're just going to straighten everything to that line. So I'm going to line that up with the straight edge of my fabric. And then I'm going to put that on my cutting mat lined up with an inch line on the mat. And then I'm just going to cut this into a rectangle. And I'm just going to pick a line and make sure we're completely squaring that off. And then you can either turn your entire mat, or I'm just going to turn the project. So when you do this, you're going to have different size burp cloths as well, because I'm not doing it to a specific measurement. I'm just squaring off the diaper that I have. If you want them all to be exactly the same, then just figure out what a good size is. Trimming just a little bit off the width and a bit off the ends, because that is where the jiggle really comes into play. And then for this one, I just clip all the way around. And you're going to need to leave a few inches open. I had tried up here, it was just a little bit skinny. This is too hard to turn under and touch, so you don't want to do the fat part. So I'm going to leave this part open. So I'm going to put two clips up here so that I remember to stop when I get to that spot. And I'm going to start about here. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam all the way around, leaving that space open for turning. We have sewn all the way around and we have an opening. I'm going to turn this over so you can see the edges better. One thing I love about this cutting mat is it's dark on one side. So when you're working with lighter fabrics, you can see, you want to make sure there's not a bunch of white sticking off this edge. because when we iron it, we don't want that to show. So we look good to go. So now I'm going to clip the corners, making sure not to clip the thread. And I like to do 2 cuts because then I can go deeper and have less fabric that has to fold into that corner. And then I'm going to get a better point when I turn that right side out. All right, find my opening. Or when I'm making things for baby, I always pre-wash my fabric, because this cotton fabric, if it isn't pre-washed, is probably going to shrink a little bit in the laundry, whereas the diaper isn't. So then it's going to feel tight and it's not going to be as nice once it is washed. And that pretty much goes for anything for babies. Burp cloths, bibs, quilts, everything is going through the wash quite a bit. So now all we need to do is just get everything pushed out nicely. We don't want the seams folded over, we want that out, but we want to make sure we're only seeing the fabric on the top, and we don't want the diaper coming through, so you don't have little pieces of white on your shoulder when you have this on your shoulder, burping baby. And I usually do all of the sides, and then I do the opening last. You could also personalize these. You could machine embroider a name on it. You could applique an initial. That would make it even more personal as a gift, or allow you to charge a little bit more if you are sewing and selling. Personalization always gets you a little bit more money because, yeah, it takes a little bit more time, but it also is something that everybody can't just, you don't walk into Target and buy personalized diaper bibs. So now we just have to fold this under and get that so that it is straight. So you'll see this looks a little bit better because it's just going to be full fabric on the front, but it does take longer because you have to turn it right side out, you have to press it, and now we're going to have to sew. We're going to sew all the way around the edges, and then I also recommend that you sew kind of down here. Don't follow these lines because they're not straight, but sew 2 down the middle so that the fabric doesn't get all wrinkled and move around too much when you wash it. And I sew about 1/8 of an inch from the edge because we want to make sure we're catching that diaper and the fabric and nothing is going to pop out and fray. And I'm going to use the green on the top and the white on the bottom. I'm going to show you how to do this one with the strip. So what you're going to need is just an old file folder like this. So what we're going to make is a template. And it needs to be longer than the diaper. So this is actually 2 parts of the file folder together so that I can have it like this. I just keep this on hand. So if somebody's having a new baby or I want to whip some of these out, I already have this ready to go. So to make this, you can use scissors and just draw a line as well if you don't have a paper cutter. But I'm going to cut 5 1/4 inch strip. And then a second piece, 5 1/4 inches. And then I'm just going to cut off the top curved part of the file folder because we do not need it to be curved. Okay, so what I did was I took this one where it has the 3 little lines where you can like fold it to make it fat. And I cut the excess off past the fold and past those 3 little lines. Because that's going to give a little flap and a nice little bend. So I'm going to take a glue stick. I'm going to put the glue on the back side of that flap. I'm going to put this underneath here to make sure I do not get glue on my cutting mat. And then I'm just going to line up that fold with the edge, press that down. So now I have a second template that is 5 1/4 inches wide and longer than a diaper. Now, diapers obviously come out pretty wrinkled. Iron your diaper before you get started. So this one is ironed. You'll also notice like the way that they stitch these diapers, it's not always consistent with the padding, but we're going to be covering that section up. I'm going to line my fabric up with a line on my cutting mat. Then I'm going to put my template 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric. And then I'm going to cut 1/2 inch to the other side. I do it this way because then I'm just measuring off the side of the template and not having to measure. But if you want to measure, it's basically 6 1/4 inches wide by however long, but you want it to be longer than your diaper. So at least 21 inches long. Now, before we iron these edges, I'm going to trim this because it's just way too long. I'm just gonna take my ruler. I'm gonna make sure I'm cutting at least a 1/2 inch off of the edge of the diaper. Now you're gonna put your strip face down on your ironing surface, and you're going to center your template. This is kind of using a file folder like a hot ruler. We're gonna iron right on it, and I've used this many, many times. It will change a little bit of color when you iron as the paper gets heated, but then it goes right back to file folder color when you're done. You're gonna do that on both sides. And I didn't keep it quite centered, but that's okay, because this is going to be on the diaper side. You just wanna make sure there's enough that when you stitch it down, it's not going to come up. If you wanted to do any kind of personalization, like applique child's initial on it, you would do that now before you sew it onto your diaper. We're just gonna keep rolling. So now I'm gonna put my diaper down, because now we need to do the short edges so that they match the diaper. So I'm gonna set it up so it's pretty much centered. And because the shape is inconsistent, I do it while it's on the diaper, and I just try and fold it to the shape of the diaper. You could fold it over, but I really don't like to have the edge of the fabric on the back side. So I like to have it folded like this. I also like to use a combination of clips and pins. You can use all pins if you prefer. And I'm going to do the same thing to this end, folding it under to match whatever curve or wiggle that this diaper has. All right, so to finish this, all we need to do is sew all the way around the edges to adhere this fabric. And I'm going to be using a white bobbin thread and a green top thread to match this. Be super cute, super easy. If you're sewing and selling, this is a great way to go because it is going to take you the least amount of time. If you're gifting these, I often give them in sets of 3 or 5, never just one, because if you've had a baby in your life, you know you go through burp cloths and you don't want to have to do the laundry every 2 seconds. Now, because I'm not starting off of the edge, I'm going to pull up the bobbin thread so we don't have a bird's nest knot on the back of the diaper. So I put my foot down, I hold the top thread, put my needle down, pull it back up, and give that a little tug, and you can see the bobbin thread came through. And then I always keep tweezers so I can pull that out, put them both under the presser foot, go forward and back a few stitches to knot. Now, I also want to show you how this is working with this pin at an angle. See how close I got? The tip of the pin is up here. But because I put this at an angle, I could sew really close and still keep the pin in there, holding everything in place. So if I had pinned straight, the pin would be right there. And I would have to stop maybe 1 stitch forward from where I am. But because I did it at an angle, I'm going to be able to sew all the way to here before I have to remove that pin. And when I get down to the edge, we want to make sure everything stays folded under and in place. So I'm going to hold it with my scissors. This one is all done. So it is a quicker way to make a gift. You would then just fold the thinner white flaps, fold it like that, maybe like that, make a little stack, put a bow around it, and you would be good to go. If you're sewing and selling, this would sell for a little bit less, I would assume, because it's not quite as fancy and it's not going to take you as long to make, and you're using about half as much fabric. Let me know in the comments which one you prefer.
Just to show you the different ways you can do these, you can do them obviously with one piece of fabric with a cool print on it. That's going to look great. The example we're going to do, I'm going to use a solid piece of fabric. This is another just solid, it'll be super cute. And then this is an example of just taking it a step further. Instead of just cutting the template on a plain piece of fabric, I pieced these 3 pieces together so that it's going to be a little bit more interesting, especially for the 1 to 4 year size, which is bigger. I think that's kind of fun, but it does obviously takes a little bit longer. So it is totally up to you how you want to do that based on the fabrics that you have and how long you want to spend on this project. The First thing you need to do is make your template. So you're going to print the 2 pieces of paper, unless you're doing a newborn. I do have that, so it will print on 1 sheet of paper. But for the 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12, 1 to 4 years, you're going to print 2 pieces of paper. You're then going to measure and make sure that this square is 1 inch. That'll make sure this is all the correct size. Next, you're going to take scissors or a paper cutter, and you're going to trim one of the pages along this line. Especially for the 1 to 4 year size, which is bigger. You're not going to trim both because this is going to allow us to overlap the paper, and it's going to be easier to tape that together. So now I'm going to line everything up. I didn't get right on that line, so I'm just going to make sure this edge, this red line, and these scissors look good. The scissors are really your best guide, and then making sure that those work. Then you're just going to take some Scotch tape or whatever kind of tape and tape down the center. You need to make sure it goes at least to here and here because the rest we're going to cut off. Then you can either cut your template apart now, or you can cut it apart when you're putting it on the fabric. But since I like to I don't like doing paper with my fabric scissors. I like paper scissors. I am just going to quickly cut this out, and I'm going to cut out the 6-month size. So you do want to print this in color so that you can follow the color when you're cutting. This red line and these scissors. Now I have my 3 to 6 month template, and I've already made these 3 sizes. So I just have all 4 sizes that I can save for future projects. Now what you need is your fabric. So in the PDF where you get the template, I did give you an idea of the size of fabric that you're going to need to make each of these size bibs. So this is, maybe a little bit bigger, and I'm going to fold it in half. I'm not going to trim both because this is going to allow us to overlap. And if you're using a directional fabric, you want to make sure you have it where it's facing towards the top. You don't want everything to be upside down on the baby. So this red line and these scissors. Now I'm going to pin this on here and cut that out. Then you're just going to, this time using my fabric scissors, which I mark to save fabric so that anyone that uses them for paper does at their own risk. This is an example of just taking it a step further. Once that's cut out, I'm just going to remove the pins. I pieced these 3 pieces together. And we're done with our template. So now we have the bib front. Now I like to use kitchen towels for the back of my bibs because they're nice and absorbent. So I'm going to show you how I set that up. This one has some texture to it, so I decided I wanted to go this way, so I'm turning it that way. And then I'm going to put this bib face down. I use the other half for a 1 to 4 years. So you can easily get 2, maybe 3 if you're doing the smaller sizes out of 1 kitchen towel. And I also love doing this because often if you get like a seasonal towel, maybe it'll have something embroidered on it. You can get them on clearance after the season. And since you're not going to use that anyway, it doesn't matter. So now I'm going to pin this right sides together all the way around. And I always sew the fabric onto the towel instead of cutting the towel and cutting the fabric because it's going to get a lot less lint into your sewing machine and the towel's not going to stretch out or be an odd shape. So I always just do it the easy way. Pin this onto the towel, and then we're going to take it to the sewing machine. Sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam, leaving a few inches along a straight edge for turning. I'm going to sew all the way around the edge with a 1/4 inch seam, leaving a section open so that we can turn this after it's sewn together. You're not going to trim both because this is going to now that it is sewn onto the towel, we're going to take our fabric scissors, cut all the way around, and then we're going to clip the curves so that we can press it and have a nice shape to our baby bib. go this way. I usually just do a lot of single clips. You can do a triangle. I use the other half as well, totally up to you. Make sure you do not clip the sewing lines or whatever. And then because this area up here, it gets pretty small, after I do the clipping the curves, I like to trim that in a little bit so there's going to be less fabric bulk in there when you turn. And this really does make a bit of a mess with the edge of the towel and the fabric, so you are going to need to clean your cutting mat if you do it over your mat like I am, so you don't get a bunch of lint on your next project that you might put down forgetting that you had towel stuff all over your workspace. Don't trim where it is open, and that is also why we did the opening along a straightaway, so it really doesn't need to be clipped to give you a good shape. As well, totally up to you. Okay, so all of the curves are clipped. Now I'm just going to turn this right side out, or whatever area up here, it gets pretty small. I try to turn this as much just using my fingers instead of a turning tool because I don't want it to poke through the towel. So you do need to just kind of get your fingers in there and run them along the edge of the towel, along the curves. And then you can just kind of do that to get your final shape looking good. And then where you turned it, you're just going to make sure that when you press it, you get that folded under, both the towel and the fabric folded under and matched up. When I top stitch my bibs, I like to match my thread to my fabric so that it's not going to show. And then you're also going to need matching bobbin thread for when you sew on your Velcro, unless you're going to choose to use snaps. So for top stitching, I'm going to use the thread that matches the top and a bobbin that matches the towel. So I'm going to go with green and white. There's going to be less fabric bulk in there when you turn. Final step is to figure out your clasp. You could do a button, you could do a snap. I like to use Velcro because I just remember wrestling with my child to get these bibs off, going around their head. I like it to be as simple as possible. Just remind whoever's going to use it to make sure they have it hooked together before they put these in the laundry. So I do like a 1/2 inch to 1 inch square. And if you're right-handed, or the mom or dad are right-handed, you're going to want the right side overlapping left. So I put the soft part on the back of the right, and I put the loop on the left. So we can sew the left side on while we still have the green on top, white on the bottom, so that the white is going to match the towel in there when you turn. And this really does. Now you'll see, because I used the white bobbin thread, you can't really see this on the back. So we're going to need to change both of our threads to put this part, the softer part, over here, because we want it to be white, so you're not seeing it there. And then we don't want to see it out here because this is going to be the top. So we need the bobbin green, the regular thread white. Then I just cut the ends. And when you hook it together, it looks great. You can't see those stitch marks. That is how easy these bibs are to make. Now I have a set of 4 bibs from newborn to 1 to 4 years.
If that weren't bad for my teeth, I might give it a try. I can see why babies like it and why it is soothing. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how quickly and easily you can make a pacifier clip that can go onto their shirt, their bib, or whatever other thing you want to attach it to. Now, I've done this before. I haven't done a video, but I did it on my blog, and I had made it with fusible fleece inside. If you follow me much, you know that is one of my favorite things, to put inside lots of things. So this one was made with fusible fleece. But then I was thinking, does it need the fusible fleece? I don't know. So I tried some other things. I tried lightweight interfacing. I don't like it. It's too stiff. And I thought, why am I doing any of this? Does it need any of it? And I'm going to say no. I like this one the best. It's the most flexible. So all you need is 1 strip of fabric, 1 piece of elastic, and 1 suspender clip. And I got this on Amazon. I believe it was a pack of 20. I'll have a link in the description below the video if you want to find these. Now let me show you how quick and easy these are to make. So So here is what you need. You need one piece of fabric that is 12 inches by 4 inches, a 4-inch piece of elastic. I'm going to try this skinnier kind. This is a 1/4 inch versus this that I've used before, which is 3/8 inch. I don't know, it looks a little bulky, so we're going to see how this one works. And then the suspender clip. And this is how that came when I got it from Amazon. So you can use it for bed sheet fasteners, pacifier holders, suspenders, etc. Metal suspender clips is what they were called. And there will be a link below the video if you want to grab some for yourself. Now for all of these, I just did a basic print, so it didn't matter which direction I cut, how it was folded, or anything like that. It's just super cute and woodsy. But what if you wanted to make it from a more directional and icon-based fabric? Let me show you how to do that. So this is 4 inches wide, and you're basically going to be fussy cutting this, meaning you're going to pay attention to what is in which part of the fabric. I'm going to place this over here. So this is the 4 inches. You just want to look at what is in this 2nd inch. So either between inch 1 and 2 or between inch 3 and 4. Because this is what's going to be on one side when it's finished, and this is what's going to be on the other side when it's finished. And these two parts are going to be inside all the folds. So you're going to have bear heads and the moose on one side, bear heads and acorns on the other side. It's going to be fantastic. So I'm going to put this face down, grab my iron, and I have it set to high and steam. And I'm going to begin by pressing each of the short ends a 1/4 inch. I'm going to grab my handy dandy clapper. And if you're not familiar with this, it is a piece of unfinished hardwood. It's really comfortable. Riley Blake has made that holding section. And we're going to be using it when we're pressing because it's going to help absorb some of the heat so it won't be hot on my fingers. Will also make the folds press that much flatter. Next, we're going to fold it in half, matching these long raw edges. Now I'm going to open it up and I'm going to press each raw edge into that center crease line that we just made. And I'm going to be careful not to have the iron go over that crease because we want that crease to stay. And so when I use my clapper, I'm staying to this side of that crease as well. Now I'm going to press the other side in. And then we're going to fold it on that first center crease and press. So you'll see one side is going to have that, and the other side is going to have the bear heads. I think I like this side the best. It's got more going on. So when we sew the clip on, I'm going to make sure that I sew it like this so that that overlap is on the back, the side that I don't like quite as much. But we'll get to that in a minute. Next, I'm going to take my elastic. I'm going to fold it in half. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to just put it in the center there, close that up, and I'm going to take a clip and clip that in place. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew all the way around about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And we're going to double back over that elastic to make sure it's nice and secure. Now I'm using a cream top end bobbin thread to coordinate with my fabric. And I'm going to pull up the bobbin thread so that I don't have a bird's nest on either side. So I'm going to put the foot down, holding the top thread, put my needle down, needle up, give it a little tug, grab my tweezers, and pull that bobbin thread. Holding both, I'm going to put them under and behind the foot. I'm going to hold them while I take a few stitches forward and a few stitches back. And now I'm going to sew all the way around, and I'm going to double back when I go over the elastic to make sure it holds nice and tight. So now I have that sewn all the way around, and since I want this to be the front, I'm going to put it through the clip like that and fold this to the back. Because where this is folded over is obviously going to be the back, so you want that to be the less interesting of your two sides. And I'm just going to do a small rectangle to have that attached, and we are all done. I'm going to take these two pieces of folded up fabric and I'm going to put them next to there and under. We're not going to sew into them, but it is going to help the presser foot stay flat and not be really tilted when I get started. It just helps the sewing go a little bit smoother. I'm going to again pull up my bobbin thread and they just push away. used again right now because now we have the back of the foot off the edge and it's kind of thick. So I'm going to put it there to make everything stay pretty straight and level. So now that this is done, all you need to do is attach the pacifier. And to do that, you put the loop of elastic through the pacifier loop. And then you're just going to push the hook and that all the way through and pull. And then this can attach to whatever you want. Look how cute when it's attached to a bib that matches. So it can be totally coordinated like that. Or you could put it on something that coordinates. This is all from the same fabric collection. Could do a whole set of them, but I think it's a great add-on as long as the child uses pacifiers that have this kind of a loop on the end of it. So I'd love to know who you're going to make them for, how many you think you might make, and if you've ever made these before. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell so YouTube notifies you whenever I post a new video. And I'm also going to put a link in the description to lots of other tutorials when you want to sew for baby. I've got the burp cloth. Now I just need the baby. All right, no babies in my life right now, but I'm very excited to share with you how to make these super cute and easy shaped burp cloths from one piece of fabric and a kitchen terry towel. It makes them super absorbent and also really cute. This is a great gift for baby showers, for new baby, make a little set, roll them up, tie them in a bow. Also a wonderful idea if you want to sew and sell baby products. So let me show you how easy these are to make. So let's start with the supplies. This is our end goal, a really cute shaped so it goes over your shoulder with a terry towel background. So what you need is the free template, and there's a link below the video to grab this. I'll show you how to put that together in a minute. Scissors and tape to make the template. Then you're going to need a piece of fabric that is 10 inches by 21 inches. If you're cutting off of yardage and you cut 21 inches, you're going to be able to make 4 of these across the width of fabric from selvage to selvage. If you're using directional fabric like mine, you want it to be going in this direction and not the other way, because when you put this over your shoulder, you don't want all of your animals or whatever icons going sideways. You want them in the direction that they are sitting. And then just a terry kitchen towel, wherever you like to get towels. I don't like to get something that's too thick. This is going to work just fine. You just want something a little bit more absorbent than 2 layers of cotton fabric. And I have ironed this so that it will be ready to go. Let's start with our template. So it was just a little bit too long to put on one piece of paper. So we're going to be cutting and be taping these dashed lines together. I'm just going to cut that part off. And then this shows you the shape of the finished burp cloth. It's going to be about 19 inches by 9 inches. And then this just shows you how you're going to cut these together, and we're going to cut it on a fold. Always print at actual size and check that this square is 1 inch by 1 inch. If you happen to forget to print at actual size, this is not rocket science. And if it's a little bit smaller than 19 by 9, it is still going to work. So don't sweat it. So I'm going to cut on this dashed line. So only cut on the dashed line on 1/2 of your template. And then I'm going to line up those dashed lines and these lines. Now this line will be placed on the fold. I'm not going to cut this out. I'm going to cut it out as we cut the fabric, and then later it will be already cut out for any future burp cloths. So I'm just going to fold this in half, place that down. Actually, I am going to cut on that line so that I know that it is on the fold. It's kind of hard to see through my paper. And now you can decide how you want to do this. You can pin it and you can cut it with fabric scissors. But what I'm going to do is grab my rotary cutting mat, and I'm going to put it on here. You can use pattern weights if you want to. I don't have any at the moment, so I'm going to use my scissors just to kind of hold that so it doesn't slide. And again, because it isn't clothing or something that has to be super exact, I am just going to use my rotary cutter, make sure I don't put my fingers where I'm going to cut, and I'm going to cut along this line. And the reason I'm putting it on the rotary mat is so that I can move the mat, but not move the fabric and the pattern. All right, so you'll see that wasn't exact right there. It really doesn't matter, but you can trim it up if you want to. Takes a little bit of practice to do that with a rotary cutter, but it sure saves a lot of time instead of pinning and cutting. So now we have our shape. Now I'm going to take my terry towel and I'm going to put it right side up. And that basically means the side that doesn't, you don't see where it's folded over. So this is the front. And then I'm going to take my fabric, put it right side down, making sure it's not on the edges. We don't want any of that in there, but putting it towards the edge so that we can use that for another project. Now I do need my pins, and I'm just going to pin this onto the towel. I do not cut the towel until after I have sewn it on because I'm going to need to cut it with either wavy rotary cutter and or pinking shears. So why cut it once and then have to cut it again? It is a lot faster to just pin this on, sew, and then do the cutting. Now we will need to leave a section open for turning, and I like to do it in the center because this is pretty much a straightaway. So I'm going to start sewing here and stop sewing here. But sometimes, you just get on a roll and you're sewing and you might forget to stop, which if you do, that's fine. You can use a seam ripper, but I like to put 2 pins just to remind myself like, hey Tara, stop, don't keep going, and sew the whole thing closed. Now we're ready to take that to the sewing machine. We're going to sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam. Now that that's sewn on, I'm going to just use my ruler and cut off this extra part. I'm going to use some of this to make a teething ring. So we'll save that for later. And then now we either need pinking shears, a wavy rotary cutter, or both. So the main thing is we want to cut all the way around, and using pinking shears is much easier than clipping the curves and itty bitty cut marks. And you just want to make sure you do not cut your stitch line. You want to get close, but don't cut it. So you can go all the way around with pinking shears, or if you have a wavy rotary cutter, you can do it even faster. You just have to make sure that you are good enough at this that you are not going to cut your stitches. So you do the same thing. And you also need a pretty new blade to make sure that's going to be sharp enough to go through there. I need to change my blade apparently. Now, when you get to the section that's open, do not use your wavy cutter or your pinking shears because we're going to need to fold that under to sew it closed, and we don't want it to be that short. So just leave that section the same. Just cut around where it's sewn. Sometimes I end up using both when there are little sections that don't quite cut. All right, that blade needs to be changed before the next project. This always does make a bit of a mess, so you want to make sure you're getting that off of your cutting mat. Now for this section where it's going to be turned, I usually either use a straight rotary cutter or scissors, and I cut a little bit further out than where the fabric is, because that just gives me a little bit more to turn under where we need to get that sewn closed. So that's all trimmed. Now I'm going to turn it right side out. I like to make that hole big enough that I can put my whole hand in here and really push out those curves with my fingers. And now we need to iron that. So again, just working those curves with your fingers so it has a nice shape to it. And I always fix and press the section that is sewn before I worry about getting the opening folded under. So these really are quite simple and quick when you only cut the fabric and you don't cut the towel until you're done. And then after we get this pressed, all we're going to do is sew around the edge. And it's a little different than what some people have seen. So if you're looking for something a little bit more unique, this might be a way to go for a burp cloth. Okay, so that is all pressed and shaped. Now I'm just going to sew all the way around. I'm going to use cream on the top thread, and then I'm going to use a tan to match for my bobbin so that we don't have a big line showing on the back. And now it's done. That's how easy it is. Just cutting the fabric to size, putting the towel on the back, and trimming around the edge. So this just makes a great gift, baby shower gift. I always like to do coordinating fabric, kind of make a set of it. So you could do a set of 2 or 3 in the shaped. You could add a bib that coordinates. This one's a little fancier. That took a lot longer. This would be something I would sew as a gift. I don't know that I would sew and sell this just because of how long that took to make. Then you could even add a pacifier holder and just really make a fun selection of things for a newborn or a young baby. And I will put links in the video description to these other tutorials as well. Happy sewing and welcome, baby. All right, so what do you think? Are you going to be whipping up some burp cloths for babies in your life to sew and sell, to gift, to donate to a charity maybe? Let me know in the comments who you will be making these for, how many you think you're going to be making, and make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you never miss a tutorial for baby or otherwise.
If you've been on the hunt for a crib sheet for your nursery or for a gift, and you just can't find anything that you love, I am going to teach you how to make one. This is going to be a crib sheet with elastic all the way around, so it's going to fit nice and snugly on the mattress. I'm going to show you how to do a standard crib sheet, a mini crib sheet, or a bassinet crib sheet, and also how to figure out how to get it to fit any mattress or playpen pad that you have. So first, I want to do a little disclaimer. This is a product for a baby and where they sleep. So I'm just going to teach you how to sew it. It is up to you to decide what materials you are comfortable with, whatever laws you need to follow if you're going to try and sew and sell these. I'm just giving you the instructions. You get to decide on all the materials. And then number two, I'm going to remind you, please, please, please pre-wash this fabric. I will admit sometimes I'm lazy and I don't pre-wash my fabric for a project, but for something like this that is going to be going through the laundry a lot, you absolutely want to pre-shrink your fabric, because if you sew it together and then it shrinks even a little bit, it might not fit the mattress very well, and that would be a bit of effort for one use. So now that we got the disclaimer and the pre-washing out of the way, let's get started. In this demo, I'm going to be making a mini crib sheet because that works the best with a traditional cotton quilted fabric. And this is from my Golf Days collection. It's going to be so cute on my nephew's crib. If you want to make a standard size crib sheet, you are going to need to start with a little bit wider fabric. It has to be 44 to 44.5 inches wide after you have pre-washed your fabric. This fabric ended up being 42 inches wide, so it wasn't quite wide enough to do a standard crib sheet, but it works for a mini, which you can also use for travel crib sheets, pack and plays, things like that. So what I have done is pre-washed, as I mentioned, ironed it, and then I folded it in half and then in half again. The goal is to get all four open corners together. And you want to make sure before you do any cutting that you have triple checked that these corners have no folds, because if you mistakenly grab this corner and cut where it's folded, you'll be using this fabric for something else and not a crib sheet, because you will have cut a hole out of the center of the sheet. So this is cut to size 48.5 inches by 35.5 inches. And then I'm going to cut a square out of the corner that is 5 3/4 inches square. I usually don't use it upside down, but I want to because I just want to make sure it's showing me 5 3/4, 5 3/4. Now I'm just going to use a heat-resistant pen, so this will disappear once it is heated with an iron, but we are going to cut it, so it's probably not going to stay on there. Okay, so this is what we're going to cut out. You can either use a rotary cutter or scissors, and I like to use a combination. I don't like to use a rotary cutter all the way to this corner, because if I go over, it's going to mess up my crib sheet, which would be a big bummer. So I'm going to use a rotary cutter to about here and then snip the end with scissors. And if you have to turn it, just make sure it stays lined up properly in these corners. Now we can set that aside and use it for a different project. It would be perfect for a little quilt square. You can make a little receiving blanket that matches the crib sheet. Wouldn't that just be so cute? If you watch many of my videos, and I hope that you do, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of fabric clips. But for this project, I prefer pins because we're going to be doing 4 corners on a pretty big piece of fabric, and I want to make sure nothing slips. So what we're going to do next, we're going to pin each corner together. So basically, you're going to lay this as flat as you can on your space, and then you're going to fold up the cutout corner right sides together, and you're just going to pin. And we're going to do that on all 4 corners. Okay, all 4 corners are pinned and we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew these corners. Now we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. I'm just going to go straight and then I'm going to come back and zigzag to prevent this from fraying. So you can either use the guides on your sewing machine, or one thing that my niece and I like to do when she is learning to sew is sometimes I will take a piece of washi tape and I will put it down. And I use washi tape because it's removable and it's not going to leave residue on your sewing machine. So I will put it down so I have a much longer guide to watch with my fabric. And then I always just double check with a gauge ruler. I set it at 1/4 inch and I make sure the distance between my needle and my tape is going to be 1/4 inch. And now that I have that straight line sewn, I'm going to switch to a zigzag. And if your machine does this, I chose a right zigzag so that the needle is going to be on the far side of, this is the right side of the stitching. So I can just have my fabric go where that stitching is going to be. And then I'm just adjusting how long and how wide it is going to be. I don't want the zigzag to go over this stitch. I want it on this side, just so it's protecting it from fraying. All right, so you can see we have our 1/4 inch seam, which is going to be nice and straight. And then the zigzag, that gives a really nice seam. So then when we turn it around, this is what the front is going to look like. That's going to go over the edge of the crib. So it's going to look super professional. Another option, instead of doing a straight stitch and a zigzag, is to use an overlock stitch. And that basically means it's going to do both of them at the same time. It's going to do a straight line down the left and zigzag to prevent your fabric from fraying. So on the Janome sewing machine, they have a specific foot for that. It has this little metal thing here that's going to guide. So I'm just going to feed it and guide the fabric along here. And then this little number is going to do all the rest of the work for me. So let's get that done. So you can see it did the line and the overlock for me. So that is an overlock versus a straight stitch plus a zigzag. So there's the difference. They're both 1/4 inch. They both serve the same purpose. It just depends on which you prefer and whether your machine will do an overlock versus a straight and a zigzag. Now that we have our 4 corners, look how perfect they look. We are going to do a bit of ironing to make the casing for the elastic. So what you're going to do is you're going to iron a 1/4 inch and then a 1/2 inch all the way around. And I find it helpful to use a gauge, a little measure gauge. This is put at the 1/4 inch. So as I'm ironing, I can just double check that I'm staying pretty consistent with a 1/4 inch. Now for a standard size crib sheet, if you are using a wider fabric and can cut to 68.5 by 44.5 inches, you will be able to do this 1/4 inch before the 1/2 inch. So all the raw edges will be sealed inside. Otherwise, if you can only go to 68 by 44, you're going to zigzag all the way around and then simply fold it up like that. But I do like the concealed raw edges where I can. Now it's pressed at a 1/4 inch over all the way around. So I'm going to adjust my gauge to 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to press 1/2 inch. Well, I didn't eyeball it well. That's why I use this. It is your best friend. Now that we have that pressed, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, we are going to sew close to this edge to make the casing for our elastic, leaving 1 inch to 1.5 inches open so that you can insert your elastic. All right, we're to our last step. We have to add the elastic into this channel that we just created. If you were sewing masks like a maniac in 2020 and have any elastic left over, it's probably perfect. This is a 1/4 inch flat braided elastic, and you can see it stretches, bounces back quite nicely. So every elastic is a little bit different. You want one that's got a good bounce back so that this is going to fit well onto a mattress. So I have cut this piece to 54 inches long, and I'm going to put a quilting safety pin in it. And I'm going to go through it twice instead of just once, so it's not as much pull on the end of the elastic. And then, oh my gosh, this just always reminds me of my grandmother. She taught me how to do this years and years and years ago. You're just going to slide it through. This is a great activity to do while you are watching TV because we got a bit of a length to go. Now, the one thing to remember is the length of the elastic is a little bit less than half the length of the channel. So you want to make sure you don't get so meditative doing this that you just keep pulling it all the way through. This end needs to stay out. So what you could do if you're nervous about forgetting that is just kind of fold that over, and here come my favorite clips. I'm just going to clip that. As you get further along, it gets pretty bunched up, so you can just kind of pull along there and get more of that elastic into the channel. Uh-oh, Houston, we hit a snag. I went too far from the edge, and now my safety pin won't go through, so I'm going to have to use my handy dandy seam ripper. Take a couple stitches out because I do not want to start over. All right, let's see if that is enough to get moving again. All right, yay. But I do need to make sure I remember to sew that part shut again. So I am going to put a clip on the fabric just to remind me. All right, so now I'm going to go back to the sewing machine. And we're going to sew these two pieces together. And I want to make sure it stays flat. So I'm going to pay attention to how it's coming out of each side and make sure that this is not twisted when I clip these together. I'm overlapping the elastic about 1 inch, and I'm going to sew it together with a zigzag stitch. So I've left the clip on the far end so that it's a little bit easier to keep them lined up. You obviously do not want your fingers near this when you're stitching. I'm going to carefully get that under there. Okay, so as long as you get it lined up well in the beginning, you should be good to go. I also am going to keep my scissors here because it's a great way to just press down and make sure everything is guiding through. So I'm going to let go of this clip now, and I'm going to use my scissors. So here we go. It is together. So now we have to pull this elastic so that it all goes inside. We don't want this big loop hanging out. So you're just going to just keep pulling to move the elastic kind of evenly around your crib sheet. And then I need to find that section that I had to open for turning. There it is. And so I need to get that flat, go back to a straight stitch. I'm going to have to hold that open so that it doesn't do that, so that I can sew along there. So now we are continuing to just try and move this elastic around so that it gets all pulled in and we can close the original hole where we threaded it. Okay, it's not sticking out anymore. We can now sew that shut. And now it's all done except for the evening out of the fabric on the elastic, which you are just going to work with your hands like this. And then you're going to be ready to go. What a fun project for your baby, for a grandbaby, for a baby shower gift, new baby gift. I can't wait to see this somewhere with my cute little great nephew on it.
We're going to make a super cute and quick toy for baby. This is a Crinkle Tab Toy. Hear that? Awesome, isn't it? You want to know what it is? It is the bag from cereal because you want to use food grade plastic in this thing. More about that when I get to the details of how to put this together. But basically, it's 2 6x6 pieces of fabric. One I did a patchwork, one I just did plain, a bunch of ribbons, the plastic on the inside, and this will keep babies entertained for hours. But don't forget about safety. Do not put them to bed with this. There's plastic in it, so just be careful. This would be something that I would use when I'm sitting staring at their adorableness, or definitely like have the baby near you. So just think safety, use your judgment, and now let's get to the fun part and see how easy these are to make. Let's quickly talk about the materials you need to make a crinkle tag toy for a child. And I got it set up a little bit so that you don't have to watch me pin a bunch of ribbons.
So basically, I am going to be using a 6x6, well, 6.5 inch now. So it's going to end up being a 6x6 tag toy. And I'm just going to do plain on the back. And this is one of the prints from my Ride the Range fabric collection from Riley Blake Designs. And then on the front, I decided to make a 4-patch. So, and I did fussy cut. I'll show you more when that's sewn. You'll be able to see a little bit better, but I basically took my little Cute Cuts ruler. This is a Lori Holt of Be in My Bonnet from Riley Blake also. That is 3.5 inches, so it's perfect size. And I put it over top of the fabric. So if I were to fussy cut this, if you're not familiar with the term, I would take it over the fabric and I'd be like, okay, I want the cowboy hat right in the middle. And so I would position the ruler and then cut around it. Or if I wanted the boots, I would do the same. So that's what fussy cut means. If you're new to that term, there's always a day when we don't know a term, right? So I'm doing a simple 4-patch on the front and just the toss on the back. And then I got 4 different kinds of ribbon and they're different textures. So these 2 are the same. They're grosgrain. This one's satin, so it's going to feel a little bit different. And then this one is going to feel different as well, because the goal of this is noise and texture. Infants love both. I cut the ribbons, the pieces of ribbon, to 3 inches each and just put them around. And you can just decide how many you want. I'm going for a lot. So I pinned them or clipped them all the way around one side, and then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to baste that. Now, here comes the fun part. I had seen this on some other posts about doing these crinkle things for the noise, and someone said, oh, you need to use food safe plastic. And I was like, what on earth is food safe plastic? Like a Ziploc bag? That doesn't make a ton of noise. And then someone said, grab your cereal and use the bag, because if cereal's in the bag, it's food safe. So this is plastic from a box of cereal that I have washed. You want to wash and dry it. And listen to that. My husband said he wants one. I did a little test just to make sure, because I was like, oh, that's such an amazing idea. And then I thought, well, how's it going to hold up? Because, you know, babies, they slobber, they chew on things. You're going to want to wash this. Can we wash it? So I made a little sample of fabric with the plastic. I put it in the washer. I put it in the dryer for about 15 minutes. I wasn't sure how long to do that. And this plastic held up no problem. Then I also thought, well, what if it's wrinkled and somebody wants it to be flatter? Can I iron it? I used my iron on a silk setting. You wouldn't want to do like cotton and heat and do too much heat, but on a silk or polyester, totally fine. Didn't shrink, didn't buckle, nothing. So I feel like that means we are good to go to use this, to use a cereal thing. So I'm super excited to get this sewn together. First step, I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to baste all of these ribbons on at about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. As I go around, I need to make sure the ribbon stays down. So I'm going to use this super cute turning tool. It's a little Riley Blake bird, just to keep my fingers away from the needle and to keep myself out of the emergency room. As I go around, I need to make sure now that we have all these ribbons basted in place, we're going to make sure they are staying to the inside. I'm going to take the backing and put it face down so that we have right sides together. Making a sandwich. And then we are going to take the cereal bag that I cut to size and put that right on top. Now it gets a little bit lumpy because you have so many ribbons under there, but the goal is to line up the outer edges and mash those ribbons. So then I'm just going to clip this all the way around, and then we're going to sew around with a 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more, just to make sure I didn't go in too far on the basting, and leaving a section open to turn. Now that we have all these ribbons basted in place, we're going to make sure it's a little Riley Blake bird. Now I'm going to clip the corners. It gets a little bit lumpy because you have so many ribbons under there, but the goal is edges and open to turn. We have all these ribbons. You can hear that delicious crinkle while I work. And now I'm going to turn it right side out. Now we're going to enlist the bird for what he was meant to do, help with your corners. All these ribbons basted in place. We're going to make sure. Okay. So normally I would say, oh, go to your ironing board and press this under. But because it's plastic, I really don't want to press it. We can on a very low setting, but it folds pretty easily because I didn't leave it too big, and we can just make sure these are, the ribbons are poking down. I'm gonna use a couple pins. It folds pretty easily. It's a little harder to clip when you have all of these ribbons. We can just make sure these are. And then the final step is just to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. That'll close your opening and just give this a little bit more of a finished look. And now that it's turned, you can see how I made it very specific images in these two corners. I think it looks so cute with the horse and the cowboy or cowgirl and the barbed wire. Love how this is coming out. Oh, and we can just make sure these are. And that's it. I really went all out on the tags, didn't I? Lots of things for babies to hold on to, and that delicious crinkle. That's how easy it is. So simple.
In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make something to help keep germs off of your toddlers and your little kids' fingers when you're at the store. This is a shopping cart handle cover. It is made with 2 pieces of fabric and a long strip of hook and loop tape. The name brand is Velcro, and it has that sound that everyone will recognize as you pull it apart. So basically, you put the hook on one side, the loop on the other side, you fold it up, throw it into your purse, and when you get to the store, you just wrap it around that handle. Great for a baby shower gift, great things to sew and sell, and just a fun way to get fewer germs on your child's hands as you are out and about. I'm going to show you how to take 10-inch pre-cuts and make these. So this one was made with 2. You can see there's a little piece on the sides and a bigger section in the center. This one I used some scraps, so it's 1, 2, 3 different fabrics, 2 on each end. You can also make them with solid fabric. So if you have yardage or something else, you could just do colors, you can do something fun. But because I do have this Thomas & Friends from Riley Blake Designs, we are going to make one with that. This is the part that will be touching the handle of the shopping cart. So nobody's going to see it. So it can be anything. It can be any old scrap that you have, and you're going to cut it anywhere between 5.5 and 6.5 inches high by 15 inches wide. And then you're going to make your outside the same. So whether you're using one fabric or scrappy fabric, you're going to get that to that same dimension. Now, I tested these sizes. I made this one out of 6.5 inch by 15 inch fabric, and I made this one out of 5.5 inch by 15 inch fabric. And then I took it to Walmart and I tested it on the cart. I prefer the 5.5 because it fits more snugly. But this one works just as well. And if I were to go to a store that had a slightly fatter handle, then I would want this one. So I would go somewhere in between. I would not go any smaller than 5.5 inches. I certainly wouldn't go any bigger than 6.5. So you can test and decide. Then you're going to also need a piece of hook and loop. This one's 13 inches long. And the reason I do it the entire length is because the cart is going to have sections where you can't get it completely wrapped. The handle isn't just open all this direction, so it's not like we know exactly where you need to put this. So putting it all the way along works great. So I've cut this to be the inside. So I'm going to put that aside. And now I'm just going to grab 2 pieces. I'm going to put the trains in the center, and then I'm going to put these cute tracks with the little location bubbles on either side. Now they are both directional, so I want to make sure I have them going in the same direction. And these are 10 by 10. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm turning it on its side because we're going to cut for this part, for that direction. And I'm going to cut this to be 5.5 inches by 10 inches. So this is going to be the center. And then for this, you can either just cut it in half, sew it on both sides, and then trim it to the 15 inches wide. Or If you want to be more deliberate about how much extra you have for another project, you can trim this to 2.75 or 3 inches. I like to do 3 inches just in case I'm a little bit off of my seams. But at the same time, if your handle cover isn't exactly 15 inches wide, nobody is going to know but you. You just want to make sure it basically covers where your child is going to grab, which is usually within that 15-inch span. I want to make sure I'm paying attention to the directionality. So these little location bubbles, the points should be down towards me, like towards the wheels of the train. So you don't want one going this way and one going this way. I mean, not that a child's going to notice, but it's a detail I would notice. You're going to put these right sides together on each side, and then I'm just going to do 2 quick clips, and then we are going to sew down both of these with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we are going to press that open. Now we have our 2 pieces of fabric, so we are going to place them right sides together, and then clip or pin. I'm a big clipper, especially for things that don't need to be super precise. I do a lot more pinning if I'm doing quilt blocks, but for a project like this, I find clips to be nice and fast and they never poke me. Are you a clipper, a pinner? Have you tried clips before? Let me know in the comments if you have a preference. This is the easiest way to do this, in my opinion. We're going to sew down one long side, across a short side, and up another long side. So we're going to leave the entire short side open for turning. Instead of leaving a section open here where then you have to get it turned and pressed under properly, I find leaving an open end on projects like this to be the easiest and then just folding it under. If it ends up under slightly more than a 1/4 inch, it is not going to ruin this project. And it's the quickest and fastest way to go. So that is what is going to happen next. So. Next, we're going to clip these 2 corners so that it's going to turn nicely. And you can cut straight across, but I like to cut kind of down at more of an angle on either side of where that stitching curves, because then you have even less fabric and you're going to get a better point when you turn that right side out. I have this all pressed and these seams pressed out. And so this is the edge that we left open. I'm simply going to fold that under about a 1/4 inch, but if it's not precise, that's okay. You just want to get it even. I'm going to take that back to the iron, press that really quickly, and then I'm going to top stitch to close that edge. Now I have this sewn together, front to back. We've stitched that edge. Now it is time to get the hook and loop tape on. I like to put the loop tape on the top of the front, because you're naturally going to roll this around and have this attached to this. And this way, when you put it onto the cart, the trains or whatever design is going to be facing the child instead of facing you. Because it's really more important that they can see the print on the fabric than what you are seeing. And so that's how I've done this one. We'll get that out of the way. So again, you can clip or pin. I just clip this in place because as you can see, they're always folded up. So they puff up a little bit. So I find putting about 3 clips on there helps keep that lined up. And now we're going to turn it over and we're going to put the loop on the opposite side. So on the back and also the opposite edge. So don't put it up here so they're on the same place. We need them to connect. And then I usually do this just to make sure I'm starting it at about the same place. Throw some clips on here. Okay, so now we're going to take this to the sewing machine. We're going to sew these 2 on and then we are going to be done. That's how easy it is. It's done. So you just flip it around your shopping cart and you attach the hooks to the loops. It's really simple to just fold, throw into the diaper bag, throw into your purse. Also, when you go to wash it, I would recommend you get the Velcro closed because you do not want all that Velcro sticking to your clothing in the washing machine. I'm going to be giving at least 2 to each person. Now, here's another example. It's a bit more scrappy of a design. So again, just a really cute idea. If you make these or anything else and post them on social media, be sure to tag me and also look in the description. I'll have a link for you to find lots of other ideas to sew for babies and little kids. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to whip up these super cute and scrappy mummy baby bibs with towels on the back. When you sew it together, it's going to look like this, but then you put it through the wash and it frays and it looks amazingly mummified.
Before we dive into the tutorial, I want to show you a couple different stages. So this is what the bib looks like right after you sew it. So you're going to sew not too close to the edges so that there's room for fraying. This one, I just got out of the wash. Look at how it just looks like used gauze. Now, just to warn you, there will be some bigger sections. So you're just going to cut those off, and it is better than I anticipated. It's also very important to pre-wash your fabric and pre-wash the towel that you use on the back, because as you know, bibs go through the laundry a lot. So you want to make sure everything's pre-shrunk, and then you're just going to run it through again to get this fun frayed edge on the mummy eyes and the mummy gauze.
Let's start by talking about what we need for this sweet little mummy baby bib. The first thing you need is white fabric. I'm going to be working from a 1/4 yard. I won't need all of it. You're going to need the template. There will be a link below this video to get that. You're going to print 2 pages, and then you're going to cut them apart and tape them together to make the template. When you print them, make sure that that 1-inch square is actually 1 inch so that you're getting the correct size for your bib. And I've set this design up to be about a 6 to 12-month-old size, because that's going to work with most babies for Halloween. If you want something very specific to the size that you like, just make a template from a bib whose size you love. Then, because we're going to be sewing a lot of strips of fabric onto the base of our bib, I'm going to be adding a light interfacing, and I'm using this Pellon 845 Designer's Light Interfacing. It works great just to stabilize this fabric as we sew other things on. Next, we need a kitchen towel. This is just one that I got at Walmart. I think it was a 3-pack. It works great. I like using towels on the back of baby bibs because then you can flip it and it's a bit more absorbent than just a cotton fabric is going to be. And another one of my favorites, I'm going to be using this heat erasable pen. Then we're going to get a little scrap of fabric. We're going to cut 2 black eyes, about 1 inch circle, or you can just wing it and do whatever shape you want. Black and white thread, rotary cutter, ruler. We're going to need some fabric scissors. No, these are my fabric scissors. These are my pinking shears. I'm going to fess up. I really don't like cutting curves, like having to go back in with little scissors and clip, 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 clipping or notching. It's like one of the worst things in the sewing process to me, but I have discovered that if you use pinking shears, it gets the job done, it turns great, and it's a lot less effort. You'll notice both of these scissors are this way. From Fiskars, I love the way this works versus a more traditional scissor where you're doing this with your thumb. I just find these to be a lot easier on my thumb and my hand, and we do enough things with our thumbs that when we can get a little bit easier, do it. Those are your supplies that you're going to need. So let's get started. You've made your template. We're going to cut a piece of fabric and a piece of interfacing that is slightly smaller, and you're going to just follow the manufacturer's instructions and press that onto the fabric. We want to make sure that we sew our strips on the front and not the interfacing side. So we're going to fold this in half. Don't press it, just kind of make sure it's folded so that you can place your pattern on the fold there. And then we are going to be taking our pen, and I'm just going to do some little dashes, or you can fully trace it. I don't know why I'm doing little dashes. We will be cutting on here later. And the reason I'm not cutting this out is because I find it a lot easier to sew all the mummy strips on the fabric and cut it at the end so that it's nice and even, and you're not dealing with a bunch of ends and trying to get it to line up now. Then you're just going to flip your pattern and you're going to draw the opposite side. So we're basically drawing this baby bib on this fabric before we take it to the sewing machine. There we have it. Now we're going to set that aside for a minute, and then we're going to take our fabric. And one thing I love about this too is because we're dealing with a mummy, you want some frayed edges. So I always use the selvage too. Waste not, want not. Now I'm going to cut strips, 10 to 12 strips, and I'm going to vary the width. I'm going to go anywhere from 1 to 1.5 inches wide. I don't want them to be completely consistent because, you know, it's a mummy and he's supposed to look a little tattered and worn. Got a nice pile of strips. That's going to be good. And now I'm going to take the black fabric, and on the template, there is a circle you can use as a guide. But again, this is a mummy. He's not going to be perfect. So I just fold this black piece in half, and then I just take my fabric scissors And I just kind of cut what feels like a circle. We have our bib drawn on white fabric. We have strips of fabric. We have eyes and we have button eyes. So it is time to head to the sewing machine and start having some fun. The first thing you're going to do before adding any of these strips is decide where you want the eyes on your bib. And I usually kind of center them. You could do them at an angle. You can see here's the top line and there will be a 1/4 inch seam. So don't put it too close to the line that you drew on there. Just have it down a little bit. So we're just going to place them like that. And then we're going to take our first strip. And this is all going to be raw edge because after you sew it together, you're going to put it in the wash and you're going to let it fray. So you don't want to sew right on the edge. You don't want to zigzag because we want this to look like a tattered mummy. So we're going to sew maybe 1/8 of an inch from that edge. And we want the eyes to be tucked under. So this is how we're going to get the bottom of the eyes attached to the bib. So I'm simply going to sew down both long sides of this piece of fabric. So we have our eyes are placed and our first strip down. And now you're just going to keep adding strips at different angles. It is truly just a random project. You're going to just keep sewing these on. I usually sew them to about here. I don't sew them all the way up to the top because then it gets a little bit thick for attaching it. Once you get a few strips on, you're going to want to put one that's going to go behind the eyes. So you can pin these back, but what I usually do is I just place my strip and then I will just pull it back with my finger as I get to it. You can do some smaller strips. So I'm just going to cut this one and use it on the other side as you get to the skinnier part of the bib. And just keep it going at odd angles so it looks like he was just wrapped up perfectly when mummified. Now I've changed to black thread and we're going to tack down the rest of the eyes by just sewing around it. You can just use a straight foot or you can do free motion. I'm just leaving this 1/4 inch foot in that I've already had in. And then we will just change that when we do the button next. I switched back to white thread and now we have the button foot on and we're going to sew these button eyeballs on here. So since this button's so small, both sides of this foot are not going to grab it. So what I'm going to do is with my hand, I'm going to slowly lower the needle down both motion. Make sure it is going into that hole. Then I'm going to put the foot down. All right, so that's going to hit both holes. So now I'm going to use the presser foot. So my next button won't take as long because I know that I have the width set right for the holes in the button. And I'm going to make these eyes kind of off center just to make him a little bit more crazy looking. I do still lower the needle by moving the dial with my hand, so it's going super, super slow. And then I always make sure the second one's going to go in before using my presser foot. He's coming together. Looks like a little bit of a mess, but I promise it's going to be the cutest bib. Now you can still see some of the lines that we drew, but some are covered with the mummy tape. So you can either just eyeball it and connect the dots basically, or you can put your template back down, line up the lines that you can see, and then trace along there so that you know where you're going to be cutting. Then you're going to take your fabric scissors and you're going to cut along the lines to create the shape of the baby bib. We're going to set this aside for a minute and we're going to open up our towel. Make sure you have pre-washed everything so that it will have shrunk because bibs get washed a lot. Now we're going to place our mummy face down on the towel. I'm going to trim the towel so there's not a lot of extra on the ends, but I'm not going to cut it to size. Now we're going to pin the bib down and then we're going to sew around with a 1/4 inch seam before we cut this. If you have pinking shears, it's time to grab them now. If you don't, I'm going to show you how to clip these corners without pinking shears. Then we're going to finish them with the pinking shears because that's my favorite. So if you don't have them, you're going to use regular fabric scissors and you're going to cut right along the edge of the white. You're going to go in a little bit closer to your stitch line on these really tight curves. And then I like to take a smaller pair of scissors, and then you're just going to do little cuts. And you do need to do them kind of close together on these really tight curves, but do not cut your stitch line. Super important. That's going to be important with the pinking shears as well. But basically, this is what you're going to do. You can also do notches where you're cutting out a triangle of fabric, which is what we're going to be doing with the pinking shears. So this is what you do if you are just using regular scissors. I find it is a lot harder on my thumb and my hand. So let's play with the pinking shears. One thing to note is that we sewed a lot of strips on here and some of them overlapped. So some of these areas are rather thick. So you're going to need to go slow with your pinking shears to not only avoid cutting your stitch line, but also to make sure you can get through all of those layers. And you certainly don't want to press down too hard and go straight into your bib. So just go really slowly and carefully. We're going to do this all the way around the bib. So this part's harder because it's so curved, but now we're getting into the part where it is thicker because it's multiple layers of fabric. So it's just a little bit harder to squeeze, but it works. Just, again, go slow. Oh, right here, I have way too many overlapped. Ooh. When you get up to where you left it open for turning, you want to go way out and just go parallel to where the fabric is, because you need to have enough that you're going to be able to fold that in. So now we just need to turn this right side out. So now I'm going to take this to my ironing board and I'm going to iron this so that we have a nice smooth area to top stitch and just double catch all of that turning part. And then we're going to be folding this part under so the curve looks good and we will catch this open end. Now we're just going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch all the way around to just double catch that seam that we had. And you also want to do a longer stitch length because it's going to be very thick. So longer stitch length, so slow, and we are almost done. Now the next step and last step is to do your closure. I prefer Velcro because it's really easy to attach when you're sewing it together, and it's really easy to get on and off of baby when you're reaching around their head. So I just have about a 1-inch piece of both the hook and the loop. And I always put the loop on the part that is going to be on the back of the bib, because if you ever didn't have it lined up right, you want the soft part touching baby's skin, so you want the hook on the front of the bib. So I'm going to start by attaching the loop to the back, and then we will figure out exactly where those hooks go and attach that as well. So we have the loop on there. So I'm going to turn this over, and then I'm going to just kind of line the hook up without having it attach and place that. So we have pretty much an idea of where we want that, and then we're just going to sew that on. So our sewing is done. Now you're just going to want to run that through the wash and get it nice and mummified.
So what do you think? Are you going to be making a bib, a burp cloth, a pacifier, or something else? Let me know in the comments which one you're going to make first and who you're going to make them for. I am always curious. And then make sure you have subscribed to my channel, hit that bell so that YouTube will notify you every time I post a new video, and happy sewing!